I like my Bambu printers. I especially like the fact that I can print multiple colors easily using the automated material systems. One of the things I don't like about them, though, is the amount of poop that gets created. So when I mean poop, I'm talking about excess filament that's purged in between colors so that you completely purge one old color so that you're not getting additional banding or color mixing going on. Now the challenge is getting this to be done efficiently enough that you're purging the smallest amount of filament possible. And to do that, you kind of have to play around with settings. I wish there would be an easier way to do this. Well, it turns out the makerspace community has figured out an easier way to do this, and I'm going to show you how to figure out your purge settings so that you can minimize your waste on your print color changes as much as possible, so that you still get nice, clean colors, but we're conserving filament as much as we can. So Eve at the moment here is actually engaging in this process of figuring out how much filament is actually needed to change from one color to another. It's probably a little hard to see, but essentially what she's doing is going from one color to the next color with no purge in between. And she'll do this one at a time on these little sheets that have been created. Now, it takes about an hour and a half to complete 2 plates, which will do all 4 color changes. So a total of 12 different color changes between 4 separate colors in your AMS. If you have a print that requires more colors, you'll need to add on additional color swap tests. But for now, let me show you how it works. So here is the print that I have set up, and you can find it fairly easily. It is listed, if I go over to my recently opened, it's listed as an all AMS combinations. And again, I'll leave a link in the description. But over in Prepare, it's just 2 plates. I've gone ahead and taken care of the 1 plate, so we're now on to the 2nd plate. Now you'll notice it's got multiple filaments listed over here in various colors. Don't mess with them. They're set up to be printed out in a specific order so that you can actually test the purging. So when I go over to preview, I'm on the 2nd plate here. And as you can see, it's only 1 layer. The idea here is that each of these colors is color coded to a different spot in the machine's AMS. So if I hit print, it's going to obviously want to try to sort of match based on the printer, and I'm printing on Eve. So what you'll want to remember is that white is A1, slot 1, yellow is slot 2, orange is slot 3, and then red is slot 4. The 2nd plate doesn't use any of the first filament. It's going to finish doing the color combinations from the remaining 3. So I know yellow is actually slot 2. So I'm going to go through, and anywhere where it's yellow, I will pick A2. Orange is A3. So I'll make sure anywhere where there's orange that I've got A3 picked. And then, oops, I missed a yellow over here. And then red is going to be A4. Now, sometimes it will try an auto match, so make sure you go through and look and see that it's working correctly. So I've got yellow 2, 2, 2, orange 3, 3, 3, red 4, 4. So I'm going to send this over to my printer. It's going to print, and in about 48 minutes, I will have the 2nd sheet, and then we'll go from there, and I'll show you how I optimize this little print that I'm doing for my daughter's class. Okay, so now that we have our little color swatches and we know how much we need to do for transitioning to get, a clear color without wasting too much, we then need to go and put it into our system. So this is the model that I'm actually playing around with. It's a little snake keyring for Chinese New Year. It's for my daughter's class. I just opted to print a plate of them. So, even just doing that will help waste less filament. The number of times that a filament is changing isn't going to change based on the number of models present, but it will definitely change the amount that is wasted overall because you're printing more. But I can even give you an example of what this would look like with just one. For instance, I'll go back here and I will just create a new plate, and I'll just copy one of these guys over there just to give you an idea of how big of a change this can be. So this is one model. So this is my little model, and you'll notice just doing one of these using the AMS set up as it is, being downloaded from MakerWorld. The model itself uses less than 3.5 grams of material, but it's flushing 30 grams. That's a lot of material. That's unrealistic, unnecessary, most likely. So let's see if we can bring that down. I'm pulling up my flushing volumes. I've got my colors loaded. And this is where the magic will kind of happen. Here is this little sheet here. All of these numbers are how much filament it thinks it's going to need to purge to transition from one color to the next. So let's see what changes we can make so far based on the little sheets that I've printed. So I'm just going to go down the row. Remember, this is transitioning from this color here on the left to the color on the right. So for instance, I'm going to change from this dark red, which is the darker red color number 1 in my machine, over to gold. Looking at my little sheet here, which is transitioning from that red to the gold. And when I was looking at the lines, I felt like this worked and I was clear with no real left over at around 100. You'll notice that going from that 1 to gold, it's wanting to do 530. So that's a massive difference. Complete waste of filament. All of this would be completely wasted if I were to leave the settings in. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that to 100. And it might get mad saying, oh, you need to do 107. No, I really don't. I'm going with this. So these are my adjusted numbers that I've got in here. These are much, much smaller numbers. The biggest number that I've got is going from the Polyterra black to the Polyterra red. So that's the numbers that we're going to use now to update. So now if you look at these statistics here, for just one, 3.43 is going into the model, and then you're flushing over 30 grams of it. This is actually 89% of this model using the initial settings would be flushed. 89%. So now we're going to put in these settings here. So hit OK. We're going to reslice again. Huge, huge change. Is it still going to be more than the model? Yes, absolutely. But that's a marked difference. And obviously we're still purging more than the model, but remember, before we were purging 33 grams of filament. We're now down to 13 grams of filament. That's 16 grams of filament that's being eliminated. And it'll be even more when we go over here, because it's going to use the same flushing volume setting. So if I go over to my big plate, where I've got all of these set up and ready to go, it finishes slicing. I'm using 66 grams of material. 1.12 is going into itty bitty little supports here. And I'm still only flushing that 13 grams of filament. That is a much, much better ratio. So that's where we're only, by printing this many models with this adjusted setting, we're only flushing roughly 17% of material compared to the 30% if we were doing it in bulk, and definitely less if we were just doing it with one. So those are two ways to shrink how much filament is being purged and how much you're wasting on a model. Obviously, print more models per sheet. That's a given. You could always flush objects into infill. I've done it on this model. There's not enough infill that it makes a difference. But the biggest thing then would be dialing in your settings. That alone saved 16 grams of filament. That changes your cost. That reduces your waste. The models still look just as pretty. I'll send these to print and I'll show you what they look like when they're done. So 8 hours later, we've got things printed. And as you can see, I have a little army of cute little 4-colored snakes to give to my daughter's class, as well as roughly 14 grams of purged filament. And this was what Bambu calculated out, and I weighed it, and it's pretty much on. This, however, would have been the original version. Nearly twice as much filament, yet producing only one piece. And before you ask, why is that a bunch of colors? I wasn't going to spend the time and waste the material just to create a pile of poop the same color as the piece. I weighed out what I needed, and that is 28 grams of purged filament, which is what we would have gotten if we had only printed the one little guy using the original Bambu settings. So you can see by just making some adjustments, you can drastically reduce your waste. So that's the process I've discovered on how to significantly reduce the amount of purged filament that you get when you're printing a multicolored print. Again, always trying to print multiples, possibly purging into the piece if you can. In this model, it didn't really make a difference. And then using the color measuring system to see how much filament actually needs to be purged rather than just having the software calculate it out. So I will leave a link in the description to the AMS color calibration file that you can use. There's actually an updated file in there that eliminates the need for the little ruler on the side, or rather it prints the ruler separately, and then you can actually get all 12 color swaps on one plate, and it only takes about 45 minutes or so. So to me, it's an even more efficient model. Now you may be wondering, if you're using filament to create these purge settings, are you really saving material? Because in my case with this little model, it does take about 15 grams to create all of those little purge calibration sheets, and doing the calibration sheets helped eliminate 15 grams of material for that plate. What I want to say to that is that just because I, calibrate the purge for this model doesn't mean I have to do it every time. In fact, I am slowly growing a large Google Sheet document where I've saved all of these purge calibrations. That way I don't have to do it every time, and I'll be able to look up what number I need to put into the system, and I don't have to do this every time. One thing that you should keep in mind when you're adjusting these flow models calibration is that you may need to actually go over into your settings, into your preferences, and actually adjust the flushing volumes, which is auto-calculate every time the color changes or every time the filament changes. It's probably worth turning those off. That way it doesn't do it every time. I have noticed that loaded pieces, done all of the calibration, saved it, and then when I go to load it, all those numbers disappear. So it's worth turning those off just as an additional level of safety. I hope this video was helpful for you guys. If you like it, please take a moment to lick the stream. That way you can feed the algorithm. And if you want more content like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and I hope to see you guys in the future. Bye!